From the top of Bohemia Mountain facing west, you're looking at the exact same view that James Johnson had when he climbed up here in 1863. Mr. Johnson, known as Bohemia Johnson, and his partner George Ramsey were hoping to find a different route into the Willamette Valley. If you turn and look behind you, you'll see down into the valley of City Creek. Out of it and the surrounding mountains has flowed a literal river of gold. These mountains are honeycombed with miles of tunnels, and many of them are interconnecting. A majority of the tunnels were dug in the late 1800s or early 1900s during one of three periods of Bohemia mining district prosperity. You can find a few old tailing piles and some rusted machinery and old rotting lumber, but most of the miners have long gone. However, those familiar with the area's history, many assume that most of the gold is still here, somewhere in these mountains. The very beginning of the story of Bohemia Mining District began in 1858 when O.P. Adams and his brother Rufus, Doc Oglesby, and William Shields traveled up what was later known as the Row River Valley for the purpose of doing a little prospecting. They followed the river until it came to what's now called Sharp's Creek, and there they began to pan for gold. But they didn't do very well. The following year, O.P. Adams returned with different partners, one named Lyle Miller and the other Frank Boy. They set up a sluice box farther up Sharp's Creek at the mouth of the smaller creek that is now known as Sailor's Gulch. The sluice box they built was similar to this one, and they were able to more efficiently extract the gold. As a result, this enabled them to acquire what they called at the time a handsome little stake. After this, the area was dormant for about 4 years until the spring of 1863. Early in that year, James Johnson and his partner, George Ramsey, came into the district from the south out of a small town called Deer Creek, which later was named Roseburg. This is mining historian Bruce Stewart describing the incident that caused the gold to be discovered.
They got into a conflict, a shooting. Not sure if a man was killed or not, but that was the rumor. And so they took flight out of present-day Roseburg up towards the North Umpqua. They hit the North Umpqua here at Glide and followed the North Umpqua River clear to Steamboat. Then they followed the steamboat all the way up to City Creek.
Here in the valley of City Creek, James Johnson killed a deer and, while dressing out the animal, looked down and saw a very rich piece of gold-bearing ore laying on the ground. After gathering some samples, he and George Ramsey climbed to the top of this mountain looking for another route into the valley. When they arrived in the sleepy little hamlet that's now known as Cottage Grove, it had the effect of nearly emptying the town. Miners were coming from everywhere, some on foot, but most had horses, mules, or donkeys, and in a very short period of time, over 100 mining claims had been filed. A small town was beginning to form on the shoulder of what has now been named Bohemia Mountain, after James Johnson's nickname. The town was called Bohemia City, and eventually it had all the usual amenities that one would expect from any frontier town. It had a sawmill, a post office, a county clerk, a store, a blacksmith shop, and a boarding house. Among the claims filed with the county clerk, now stored in the Douglas County Historical Archives, you find the name James Johnson, and his claim was filed in August of 1867. On the same page, on a different claim, you find the name of Aaron Rose, also filed in August of 1867. Aaron Rose, who owned the donation land claim where the town of Deer Creek was located, was already a wealthy man by this time, but he too fell victim of gold fever and was among the hundreds of miners seeking their fortune in the Bohemia mining district. In 1870, Aaron Rose decided to incorporate the town of Deer Creek, renaming it, of course, to Roseburg. Another man seeking his fortune in the Bohemia Gold Rush and filing with Aaron Rose on the same mining claim, you find Stephen F. Chadwick. Mr. Chadwick was a lawyer admitted to the New York State Bar on May 30th of 1850. He later moved to Roseburg and served as Douglas County judge. He also represented Douglas County in the State Constitutional Convention and went on to become the Oregon Secretary of State and eventually served as Oregon's 5th governor. Another name found in the archives that played a pivotal role in the development of the Bohemia mines was A.B. Ferrier, or more commonly known as Bird Ferrier. Among the many things accomplished by Mr. Ferrier, it was the sale of his interest in the Excelsior claim to Joseph Knott for $700 that had the most impact. Because 2 years later, we find in the Oregon State Journal that James Johnson, who was known as Bohemia Johnson, sold what was probably the remaining portion of the Excelsior's claim to Joseph Knott, and this was a turning point for the Bohemia mining district. In the Lane County Archives was found a copy of the original handwritten record documenting the sale. By the way James Johnson handled his mining claims, it becomes clear he was a shrewd businessman. According to historian Ray Nelson, he was from the country of Bohemia, and as a result he was not literate, at least not in English, as he signed this document with an X. Mr. Knott then ordered a stamping mill that would begin crushing rocks containing the gold. This is the original mill purchased by Joseph Knott in 1870. It came from San Francisco up the coast to Portland, and then up the Willamette River to Eugene, then overland to Knott's mine. It took an entire summer to move the mill into place on the east side of Grouse Mountain. Because there were no roads, they chose to follow the ridge lines, using oxen and mules and clearing their trail. This is a small segment of the original Knott's Trail that is still being used by hikers and off-road vehicles. And this is a place on the trail where the road builders had to cut through solid rock, and just beyond they built a rock wall to shore up the roadbed. This is the place where they put up a log building to house the stamp mill, and this is an original photo of the building when it was operating during the 1870s. The mine shaft itself was farther up the hill on the very top of Grouse Mountain. These 3 craters, which are about 40 feet in diameter, are the openings of the mine shafts that went straight down into the mountain following the vein of gold. All 3 have since caved in, and this one is filled with fallen trees and debris. Later, other shafts were dug into the sides of the hill, this one on the east side, which is completely caved in, and this one on the west side that is still open for a short distance. With the stamping mill in operation, the river of gold was beginning to flow until the winter of 1877, when heavy snows crushed the log building that housed the mill, and interest in the area began to wane. It wasn't until July of 1889 that a rich strike on what was called the Star Vein restarted the rush for gold. Large commercial operations began, and fresh new strikes were found. The largest of these mining companies were the Annie, the Music, the Champion, the Helena, the Vesuvius, and the Noonday. Boarding houses were erected to accommodate the influx of miners. This one was located near the Champion Mine, and another one on the west side of Fairview Mountain was by the Vesuvius Mine. It took 3 days to get from Cottage Grove to the mines, starting by stagecoach, and the Painted Post Ranch was the first overnight stopping point, which was also the end of the road, and the stagecoach went no further. These were the stagecoach drivers, and their names were, starting from the left, George McQueen, James Plaster, and James Potts. From here on up to the mines, the trip was made by pack train, and the horses crossed Sharp's Creek at this place known as Pony Bridge, and this is the place where the bridge used to be. After crossing the creek, the pack train continued on up the hill until it came to Knott's Trail, which led to the mines. In 1905, a road was completed that allowed wagons to travel up the west face of Fairview Mountain. It was called Hard Scrabble Grade, and that's a pretty accurate description of the road. After it was opened, another overnight stopping place was built at the bottom of the hill, and it was known as the Mineral Hotel, and this is the place where it used to be. Close to the top of Hard Scrabble Grade is the Vesuvius Boarding House and Processing Mill. The structures are all gone, and only a small amount of rusted machinery can be found scattered on the ground. In the Cottage Grove Mining Museum archives can be found the records of mining historian Ray Nelson. In these records, you find that part of the Vesuvius Mining Company was originally discovered and claimed in 1899 by the husband of a woman named Edith Stevens, and she had one of the 2 operating woman-owned mines in the district. She sold to the Oregon-Colorado Mining Company, which eventually became part of the Vesuvius Group, and was one of the richest mines in the area. Another part of this prosperous mining company was what was called the Sweepstakes Group, and was purchased by a Mr. John Brunn in the year 1900. This is his granddaughter, Marcia Allen.
John Brunn was an early day miner in the Bohemia country, and he was my grandfather. He worked the Sweepstakes mine for 16 years and then sold out to the Vesuvius Mining Company.
The Sweepstakes mine is presently filled with water because of a small dam at the mouth of the tunnel. Here is Bud Stewart, the present owner of the Vesuvius mine.
Well, Hard sold a lot of stock, and I've got some of his old certificates, and he got people all over the country to buy his stock. And he had promotional materials, and he was an astute businessman. And he did make some money off the Vesuvius because the upper workings did produce some good ore.
At the same time the Vesuvius was beginning to thrive, another mine located by a man named Philip Champion was purchased by Pat Jennings, the man on the left, pictured here with his brother George. The Champion Group was the most consistent producer of the Big Five, and indeed is still producing today, but in very small amounts. There was even a tramway to haul the ore that ran up and over the Champion Saddle to the music mine in order to combine the processing at these 2 operations. This is the Champion Mine office with some of the office personnel. In historian Ray Nelson's archives was found another entry for one of the Big Five. It was called the Annie Mine and was located in January of 1899 on Grouse Mountain by William Oglesby and his partner Henry Pearson. Mr. Oglesby was one of the 4 original prospectors who had panned for gold in Sharp's Creek 41 years earlier. Since then, he had acquired a medical degree and had served as mayor of the short-lived town of Lemati. He named the mine after Annie, his daughter, the woman on the right, and it produced a fabulous amount of gold. Because of the quality of the ore being found and the revenue being generated, in 1903, the Oregon Securities Company hired Andy Nelson, the father of Ray Nelson, to build a powerhouse to bring electricity to the Champion Mine. He decided to construct it at a small settlement that's now called Lund Park, and the powerhouse itself was located on the other side of Bryce Creek. He powered it by running water to his turbine using a large pipe called penstock from a reservoir upstream at the mouth of Champion Creek. This is a 1903 photo of the dam for the reservoir, and this is the place where it used to be. After 100 years, nothing remains of the dam or the powerhouse, but at Lund Park, some of the foundations of the houses are still here. However, in front of the museum in Cottage Grove can be found the Pelton water wheel that used to turn the turbine. With the advantage of electricity and the increased production it brought, the area was beginning to thrive. The closest town, Cottage Grove, was also booming. Venture capitalist money was being invested in the mines from as far away as London, New York, and Boston. Rapid growth and prosperity was overtaking the small town, and it was undergoing a building boom. This is the construction of what is known as the Cottage Grove Hotel. There was also a railroad spur being built off the main line to haul the ore from the mines to the smelter in Portland. After the rail line was in service, it not only hauled the ore, but it also hauled passengers, general freight, and even mail deliveries. It was nicknamed Old Slow and Easy because of the many stops it made, which occasionally included removing a cow from the tracks. This last period of prosperity came to an end in 1941 when America entered World War II. President Franklin Roosevelt issued an executive order, E-208, closing all mines not essential to the war effort. The mines never did recover, and the last chapter of Bohemia mining district receded into history. Primarily, what remains today is that tailing piles and some of the tunnels are still open. The railroad that once hauled ore to the smelters in Portland has now become a very popular bike path. This is the place where the Champion Mine used to be, and here's the main entrance with a creek that runs out of the tunnel. There are a number of entrances that access the Champion system of tunnels, and this one is called the Evening Star Mine, which is located toward the top of Grouse Mountain on the southwestern side. This ore car is being used to move ore out of the tunnel to be processed at a different location. The Secord family is the present owners of the Champion Group and are the ones working the Evening Star Mine. The tramway that led from the Champion Mine to the Music Mine is no longer there, but the grade it used to follow is still here and is used as a road that leads to where Bohemia City used to be. This reproduction of the old post office is the only evidence that the town was ever here. These are tailing piles from the Music Mine, and Bohemia City was right below them. This low place is where most of the houses once stood, and this is all that remains of the processing mill. Over time, the mines continue to affect the culture of Cottage Grove. One man who made a significant contribution by painstakingly documenting every detail was the miner and historian Ray Nelson. In the town of Cottage Grove, his name is literally a legend, and he did more to preserve Bohemia mining history than any other person. Here is his daughter Nola, who still lives in Cottage Grove.
The Vesuvius group was the last big group that he owned, and those are the ones that I was mostly aware of. And he sold most of that to Bud Stewart, except for one piece that he kept for the family. And then we had any number of unpatented claims, and we would go up and do the locating them, and then we would have to do the...
There were other mining historians that also made significant contributions by documenting Bohemia mining history. One such man was F.J. Hard, the man on the right, pictured here with Charlie Bruno. Another was Ivan Hoyer, who authored the book called Bohemia Gold, and a third historian named Guy Lebo, who was the former owner of the mine at Crystal Basin. These and many others have helped keep alive the mining traditions, such as the Bohemia Miners' Breakfast that takes place every year not far from the top of Bohemia Mountain. And the event is sponsored by the Cottage Grove Prospectors and Gold Diggers Association. It's a very popular affair. Around 1,600 people make the 40-mile drive up to the 5,300-foot elevation of Bohemia Saddle Park. And the Bohemia Mining Day celebration is one of the largest festivals of the year. There are many different kinds of activities, and it all revolves around the mining culture. Early Western-style costumes are always part of the celebration. The Bohemia Mining Day's attractions and events are all reminiscent of the glory days of the Bohemia Gold Rush. And it all began a long time ago with one man who had the nickname of Bohemia.